For better or for worse, what has your child done to permanently change the way you view them? I was out with my sister when she was 6 or so. We are Indian and speak Hindi and English at home. I was out with her and my grandma in Pacific Mall. Think big Asian indoor strip mall. There was a little Chinese girl about 5 crying alone. Me and my grandma try unsuccessfully to try and communicate with this girl. My sister then walks up and in fluent Mandarin starts talking to this girl about God knows what. She calms down and even laughs a little. She turns to my grandma who only knows Hindi and says that the girl is lost. It turns out that the daycare my parents sent her to had a big population of Chinese kids. In order to fit in better, she learned a freaking language. From then onwards I realized that she is going to grow up to be much smarter than I. Yeah, dude. Children can learn languages pretty quickly. I still envy the 10 Wyoming who could figure out English by playing video games and listening to pop music. Now I'm all lazy and stuff. Not my kids, but I thought this story needed to be put out there. So as a job over the summer, I'm a college student. I'm a teacher's assistant for art classes. We had this really well-behaved 6-year-old. Let's call him B. The classes I helped out with were day camp-esque, so we tend to get the super riled up children that parents want out of their hair for the week. We got used to it after a while. Well, B was the exception. He always had the best manners and was always quiet and well behaved all day. Until one day, he was bouncing off the walls. I mean, he was going nuts. So I finally pulled him over and asked him what was going on since he was always too well behaved. His response floored me. B. I'm sorry, Mr. Faust evolved. I'm just trying to get my energy out today. And so I asked him why. B. My mommy wasn't feeling good this morning, so I want to make sure I can get all of my wiggles out before I go home so she can relax. Best kid ever. That kid is a freaking hero. Long story, so I'm apologizing up front. I'm buried under a mountain of debt because of my daughter's medical condition. My kids don't get much because we're always behind on some hospital or doctor's bill. We were out with my sister one weekend, and I knew we were going to pass by this place called Redemakers. It's like a Build-A-Bear, but you build remote controlled cars. I asked her if we could avoid the place because I knew her kid would make a beeline for it. He already had a half dozen of the things, and I knew I couldn't afford it. Sure enough, as soon as we get close to the place he starts throwing a fit because we aren't going there. She's never been able to say no to the kid, so we go in. The cars start out as an empty shell, with some basic wheels on it, and costs about $20. You can add all sorts of crap to it, an engine, wheels, special tires, chrome hood scoop, etc. Her kid goes nuts and starts grabbing all sorts of crap to add to his car. At least $100 worth of stuff. My son walks up with a body, and I'm feeling like a complete loser because I can't get him anything. Before I can even speak he says, "Dad, can I just get the car? We don't have to put anything in it. I just want a car." He was only 7. It was the first time I realized he knew we were poor, and even though his cousin was getting all the extras for his car, he'd be okay with whatever he could have. It might not sound like a big deal, but it meant a lot to me. Learned something about both my kids today. I came downstairs after working a night shift to find the house empty. My boy, 6, was in school and my daughter, 3, was out with her mother shopping. Just me and the cat. I found him crouched in the middle of the living room, blood and drool oozing out of his mouth and shivering. My first thought was maybe he got his head slammed in the door. Sometimes he tries to follow the family out and gets caught. He's 17 now though and hadn't done that in years. So I packed him up and took him to the vet. Bone cancer. The vet figured his jaw got so fragile it broke when he was eating. He was in great discomfort. We decided to put him down as soon as possible, but I had to get my boy from school. My wife and daughter showed up and waited while I drove to the school. My boy wept openly the entire drive. When we got there the vet had the IV started, had given him hydromorph so he was comfortable. The vet asked if we were ready and administered the drugs. My boy stroked Kitty's head and said, "It's okay. Your life is ending but a new one is starting." I never told him that. I simply said Kitty was going to die. Then he said, "I love you. I'm here," as he died. My daughter, God love her, at 3 years old said nothing until we were about to leave. She looked back and said, "Yup, He's dead alright. Not sure about her. Your daughter is brilliant. When my daughter was barely 2 years old, I was sitting on the couch in the living room while she played in her bedroom, which is a few feet away. I was struggling to get homework done for grad classes and had been rather short with her that day. She apparently heard me complain under my breath that I was cold, and next thing I knew, she was walking out of her room with a blanket from her bed to put around me. It was such a compassionate and empathetic gesture from such a little person that I was really touched. I stopped doing my homework that afternoon and just focused on her. She's now a few months shy of 4 years old and still does little things like this. Whenever I think toddlers and children are completely self-absorbed little monsters, I remind myself of moments like this and realize they can be so much kinder and more thoughtful than adults. My oldest daughter is 5 years old. Her dad and I are no longer together, and he hasn't been in her life much since birth. He's only seen her, on average, once a year. A few weeks ago, she looked at a picture of her father and said, "I still love my daddy even though he doesn't love me." I learned that day that my 5-year-old is a much stronger person than I. Children have such a simple worldview. Once they realize that love isn't there, they admit it. I knew that my sister didn't love me from an early age. I thought that was normal until I saw other families and sisters' brothers were best friends. Oh well, we're cordial now. My 6-year-old son told my wife life is a game and I can win if I want. When she asked for clarification, he said if I want to, I can make people do whatever I want, and they are happy to do it. My 8-year-old son used the word trepidation correctly in a sentence. Blew my mind. I knew he was smart, but that was kind of like a "oh crap, he is going to be smarter than I am" moment. This happened just this weekend. I have this old cat, Cheadle. He's been acting weird lately and I suspected he was diabetic. Turns out he is. The vet says it a couple hundred to run tests to confirm the diagnosis. I'm so broke it's painful. I always tell the kids about when they were babies. Cheadle used to watch over them while they slept. My oldest asked how much it would be, and I asked why. He said, "I have money. Cheadle looked after us, now I can look after him. I always tell my son I want to be like him when I grow up." This brought me to tears. What a sweet kid. I hope the kitty will be alright too. When my son was about 8 or so, he came home and told us that they had a new kid in class, Robert, who was painfully shy. My son was thrilled that the teacher asked him to be Robert's friend and to show Robert around the school and introduce him to other kids. I asked, "What's he like?" My son responded, "He's great. He was shy at first, but he started talking to me and I really like him. He's originally from New Jersey. He likes baseball and basketball. He has curly hair, he has 2 sisters, and he's really funny and really smart." A week or so later, Robert came over to our house to play. Robert is black, we are white, and it hit me. My son found lots of things to say about Robert but never thought to describe him through his race. Kids are funny that way. I intern at a pretty diverse preschool and the children are very colorblind to one another. The other day a black boy and a white boy announced we're going to be brothers now and didn't see any reason why they couldn't be. Right in the feels. My story isn't as tear-jerking as some here. It's actually silly, but it's what inspired the question. My 1YO recently started getting a thing for chocolate a few months back, and one day sitting at the computer, I start smelling poop. Which with a 1YO it isn't uncommon, but what was weird was how strongly it smelled. I turn around and to my horror she's digging into her diaper eating her own poop. Now I know poop eating touching isn't uncommon at all, but it was just the way she was eating it that made me simultaneously cringe and want to throw up. She was cleaning her fingers like a fat man licking off his fingers after eating an extra saucy plate of baby back ribs. Ever since then I can't eat anything she's touched or placed in her mouth unless I know there is absolutely no chance that she has been in contact with her own poop. Tell it to her first partner. My 5-year-old daughter turned down a disco party that all of her classmates, as well as her 2 cousins, were going to. The mother of the kid took the chance at morning assembly. Class all sit on a rug and the plan for the day is set out. Parents have a chance to bring show and tell items or talk to the kids as one group about important stuff. To tell everyone that they were hiring an ice cream bar to be there, a pirate and princess hosts, and reeling off the list of lollies and little toys that would be in the party bags. I could see my little girl hunched over in the middle of the cheering, excited group, visibly deflating and getting more miserable with every description of the stuff she was missing out on. The mum even said, "Is your invite still in your bag? Child of sweetest secret," and she said, "No, I don't want to go. I want to stay home." I was worried about this. She clearly wanted to go but was lying to avoid it. After assembly I drew her aside, crouched down and asked her if there was a bully there she was scared of, or somebody telling her not to go. She burst into tears and howled, "It's a disco party with flashy lights. If I go you have to be there, and you might have a seizure and be hurt and scared. I have uncontrolled epilepsy." She flung her arms around me and just sobbed. On the day of the party, which I secretly RSVP'd for her, her grandma picked her up and took her. She had a blast and the mum of the event even packed me my own lollibag. I never knew how lucky I was to have her love me that much until then. I have a 4-year-old son. Now, don't take this the wrong way. I've always loved him and would take care of him no matter what, but up until he was almost 4, I was withdrawn. Well, one day I was having a breakdown emotionally. School stress, job stress, got dumped. He walks in and climbs onto my lap. He lays his head on my chest and puts his little hand in mine. He looked into my eyes and said, "I can hear your heart, so it's not really broken. You're the best and cuddliest daddy ever and I love you 5,000 million. It was at that point that all the walls came down and I realized what it was like to love and be loved unconditionally. That's beautiful. My 2-year-old daughter did something similar recently. I've been stressed out over various things and I snapped at her over something trivial. She stopped, looked at me and said, "I love you, mommy." That brought me back down to earth really fast. My 3-year stepdaughter looked at me when I picked her up from daycare, held up her family box, a box they make with pictures of all their close family, pointed to her mother and said, "Mommy doesn't love me anymore. Mommy loves half-sister's name more." I may hate the ever-living heck out of her mother, and she may be a terrible person in general, but I told that little girl, "No, your mommy loves you, and I love you, and daddy loves you," and so on. It worries me as to how her self-worth will be affected in the future. My daughter's birthday is coming up this August. For her whole life, she has loved turtles, especially sea turtles. Most of her stuffed animals are turtles, as are many of her toys. For this birthday she decided that, instead of presents, she wants her friends and family to give her money and then we are going to take her to a turtle sanctuary to donate the money to help the turtles. She turned 7 this August. She is a far better person at 7 than I was at 30 and a far better person than most of the people that I know. She is going to be okay in this life. My 1-year-old just looked up at me while rocking him last night and said, "Hi Dada." They were his first words, and now I'll always have a soft spot for that cheeky little shite. I'm 9 months in. I can't wait for this. D. My daughter was 8. I heard Hunger Games was a good kids movie but had no idea what it was about. The wife and I took her in about 20 minutes and we were freaking out because of all the violence. We felt ashamed and I kept asking my daughter if she was okay and told her we should leave, etc. She pleaded with me to stay and said she was fine, etc. Reluctantly I agreed but probably shouldn't have. Anyway, she was fine, but back in the car I said, "Look, Dad messed up. You shouldn't have seen that and I should have done my homework first. I let you finish it and in return you can tell no one that you saw it. Deal," she says. Fast forward a week and we had some friends over. Apparently my wife had mentioned to them prior that we were going to take her to the Hunger Games. I think they knew how violent it was, so the guy comes over to my daughter. "So, daughter, did you end up going to the Hunger Games without missing a beat?" And a completely straight face nope. And she keeps doing whatever task she was doing. He presses, "Oh, I thought you were." She cuts him off. "No, we saw some G-rated crap." Instead, she smiles brightly and the skips off to go play. I saw it all go down and the level of ability and control was amazing. She was flawless. I have never looked at her or her mother the same again. Now that you know she's a smooth and gifted liar, you can never trust her again. Last night my almost 4-year-old son was helping his mother cook pasta and sauce. He was stirring the sauce and somehow he bumped the spoon and the sauce flew up and landed on him. He said, "God dang it." From that moment forward I know that he listens to what I say, so he has no excuse for not picking up his toys. I know he hears me when I tell him to do things. You turned that to your advantage pretty quickly. He never called me after I had open heart surgery, quad bypass with pacemaker. It's been 7 years, he still hasn't called. When my oldest child was young, he was horrifically destructive. Everything you can think of, he attempted to break. Gallon of orange juice in his bed, coffee grounds, dry thankiagesis, in the closet, flour on the floor, eggs on the floor, all my Christmas ornaments. And his sister is 13 months younger and he, like airborne, just led the way. I cannot even get you to understand. I ran damage control when I woke up every morning. Doesn't matter how hard you try, you do actually have to sleep some time. As he grew up, he was diagnosed with severe ADHD and if they could have, would have called him mildly autistic. He was angry as heck and ended up not living with me for his senior year of high school. He took a swing at me and I could not let him live with us as it would have been dangerous and unfair for his sister and little brother. A month ago he graduated from 8 and is an air traffic controller in a combat group stationed in Germany. Before he left, he put his hand on my cheek and said, "You know, you loved us as hard as you could, even when we were buttholes. We're gonna be just fine, Mom." I still remember the stress of raising him, but man, I am pretty dang sure it was worth it. Then they do things like send me Weebs videos and I am sure I screwed them up all over again. I'm a single dad who has his wee one every day but Saturday. While taking my son who had recently turned 4-year-old son to pre-K, the following conversation took place. Him: "Daddy, will you share school with me?" Me: "No Thomas, I have go to work." Him: "Okay, now you're Thomas and I'm Daddy. Thomas, can I share school with you?" Me: "No Daddy, you need go to work." Him: "Okay, now you're Thomas and I'm Thomas. Thomas, will you share school with me?" That taught me many things about my kid right there. Man, analyzing this is like doing an English essay. I am the guardian of my sister. I'm 27. She is 5. When she finished preschool she made a memory book with all kinds of things like her favorite food or her favorite colors. I found it recently. She is currently only in kindergarten. I found in it "Who is your best friend" with Bubba scrawled beside it in her handwriting. I walked into the living room where she was playing with Legos and asked her who her best friend was nowadays and she replied with Mackenzie, who is one of her classmates in kindergarten. I hugged her, said I loved her, and only cried a little after I got out of view. One day my 5YO boy was being really mean to his 3YO sister. I really don't remember what happened but I was very upset at him. I told him to think about what had happened and gave him 5 minutes. After the 5 minutes he held my hand and said, "I'm sorry Daddy, but I am imperfect." My heart melted and I forgave him. My dad would have just agreed. LOL. Long story, apologies. My 7-year-old son has always been a kind and loving child, accepting of everyone and never one to say anything bad about a person. He's in 1st grade and has these 2 really great friends he always hangs out with, both boys. Keep in mind we live in a highly conservative religious area in the Bible Belt, so our family values are different than the majority. One day he comes on the verge of tears and just walks into his room. I follow and find him under his bed crying. I cuddle next to him and ask what's wrong. He says, "You know my friend S? We were playing with R yesterday and S told R that he really likes him, like a girl likes him. R said that was gross and stopped playing with us. Today, R told everyone that S was a F and evil and was teasing him, so S started to cry. Now my 7-year-old is sobbing and I can barely understand him. He goes on to tell me how he stood in the middle of a crowd of 1st graders, hugged his friend S, and yelled at R that the only evil person here was him. How horrible a person he is to be so mean to his best friend, and how he'd rather be friends with someone who likes boys instead of a bully. Then I guess he tells all the other kinds who are taunting that they are also evil children and they should be ashamed of themselves. Now as he is taking his friend S away from the crowd, He screams back at them that people like you make Jesus cry. His teacher at this point was coming to see what was happening and R got in trouble. But to this day my boy is still great friends with S and has only agreed to be friends with R if he apologies for being such a big bully. I have never in my life been prouder of him. People like you make Jesus cry. I think your son might have a better understanding of Christianity than most. It's amazing to me that, at 185 centimeters tall and 103 kilograms, I can be brought to tears when our adopted 1-year-old son climbs into my lap and demands that I read to him. His mom reads age-appropriate stuff to him and he enjoys it, but I read The Hobbit, or the Thrawn trilogy, or something else epic to him. He falls asleep against my chest, just breathing, sucking his thumb and knowing that he is well loved. This made me tear up. Yesterday, while I was vacuuming, my 15-month-old went over to where it was plugged in. We locked eyes and I told him, no, don't do it. He unplugged the vacuum and looked at me with a huge grin. I started walking over to where he was and he dropped the cord and took off down the hallway. I realized that not only is my baby now a toddler, but that he is picking up older brother's love of mischief. Speaking of mischief, when he was still just crawling, my son used to love to go over to the CD cabinet and quickly rake them all out onto the floor before we could stop him. Even at that age, once he knew he wasn't supposed to do it, he would actually casually crawl backwards to the cabinet, staring and grinning at us the whole time. My niece, when she was 3, had far too much of a grip on reality. Me, niece, you should probably pick your teddy up, you're dragging it through the mud. Her, oh, that's okay. If it gets dirty mommy will just put it in the washing machine. Me, I don't know if Teddy likes the washing machine. Why don't you make it so he doesn't have to go in? Her, uncle, Teddy is not real. Teddy does not care if Teddy goes in the washing machine. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.